Schwartz on.
Good evening, Jeff Beals. Could I just confirm that you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Beals, can we just confirm that you can hear us again?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Check 1, 2.
Good evening, Karen. Could you just confirm that we can hear you and you can hear us, please?
Right, 1 minute until the show begins. Curtain call, final call. Right, good evening, everybody. We will begin.
Yes, the recording has started, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Scrutiny Panel on the 22nd of February 2020. Welcome to members of the public, to those in the audience, and to those listening online. There are no practice evacuations this evening, so if the alarm does sound, please evacuate down the staircase to the back of the town hall and round to St Runwald Street in the car park behind the Town Hall. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, and we will be available to watch afterwards. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 7:30, depending on progress of business. I am Councillor Mark Corey, Chair of the Scrutiny Panel, and I represent Wivenhoe Ward. We'll go around the room now to introduce councillors and officers. To my right,
Richard Block, Senior Management Team Support for the panel.
Councillor Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Mike Lilly for Old Ether Hyphen Row Hedge, substituting for Councillor Tina Ball.
Councillor Derek Loveland, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward.
Dennis Willets, Lexton and Braeswick Ward.
Nigel Chapman, Rural North Ward.
Owen Howell, Clerk to the Committee.
thank you all and good evening. So item 2, substitutions. Councillor Lilly is substituting for Councillor Bourne, as he said. Item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items scheduled for this meeting. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any councillors?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, don't know if I need to declare I'm a member of the board of the Mercury. Thank you.
I think it's appropriate, thank you. Okay, thank you. So just Councillor Barton there. Item 5, the minutes. There are no minutes to approve at this meeting. The last meeting we had last week has not been completely written up yet. I forgive you, Owen. We'll get those next time around, thank you. Item 6, general have your say. We have no registered speakers at this point. Are there any? No, okay, thank you. Item 7, decisions taken under the special urgency provisions. There are none. Item 8, cabinet and portfolio holder decisions called in for review. There are none. And item 9, A or B, items requested by members of the panel. There are none. Therefore, we go straight to item 10, which is one of our main items this evening, the review of Colchester Borough Council's partnership arrangements with the Mercury Theatre, Colchester Arts Centre and First Sight. So we're very pleased to have with us 3 excellent leaders of our arts organisations in Colchester and supporting teams in the background waiting in the wings should they need to come on. So I would like to thank Steve Mannix, Sally Shaw and Anthony Roberts for being here. And we have asked you to present to us, and we will then scrutinise partly the agreements that we have with you, the partnerships we have, and the performance and relationships that we have together. And that will be our focus, strategic but focused this evening. So really, I'd like to hand over straight away to you. And Anthony, I believe you're first, as it's a special evening for you, and you may want to get away a bit earlier. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for organising this on my wedding anniversary. Thank you for letting me go first. Right, I'm going to share the screen, I think, I hope. Wow, look at this. Look at this. Oh. So, thank you. I shall speak, I hope, for about 10 minutes. And then I think we'll take questions together. So my name is Dr. Anthony Roberts. I'm the director of Colchester Arts Centre, never knowingly understood, the little church with the big attitude deep in the heart of Essex. I'm going to try and be really clear and really clinical. I've been told off for poetry. I've been told off for introducing opera into these meetings. So I'm going to be really succinct and focused tonight. Lovely view of the church. 2 questions, just 2 questions. How much do you invest? What do you get? 2 questions there. So I hope to cover those for you. So, how much do you invest? £48,175. So that represents 7% of the whole. The point I would like to make about that is that £48,175 is the foundation stone on which we build the the rest of the money. Without that investment, it would be very difficult for us to operate commercially and very difficult for us to invest the other investment. So that translates in revenue to, for every one of those £48,155, we generate £12.99, which is just so annoyingly short of £13. It makes it look a bit like a supermarket number, but that's how the maths came out. But that's not all you give us, because you also give us, oh God, a little bit trigger happy there, £35,000 of capital investment over the last 2 years to put into our little church. And we turn that £35,000 into a £708,000 capital project. So for every pound of that capital you gave us, we translated that into £20, £85 of further funding for the borough. We give you jobs. 4 full-time staff. The whole operation of the Arts Centre is undertaken with 4 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, and a sort of rolling cast of 20 freelance and casuals. All of these, apart from one of the full-time staff, live and work in the borough of Colchester. We give you inward investment of a typical year, and what's a typical year in these times? But a typical year will be about £780,000 worth of turnover. And of that £780,000, 507, so over £500,000, comes back into the borough of Colchester, either through wages or through local suppliers. What about the bit that isn't? The bit that isn't is often spent on things like artist fees, utilities, and that sort of arrangement. Now, what art do you get for your money? Now, it's very difficult to count art, to put numbers on it, but in our funding agreement, that's exactly what we have attempted to do. How do we count it? Well, we count it very clinically. We tell you that our target is 12 jazz shows, 30 folk shows, 40 rock and pop shows, 40 comedy shows, and then we give you an actual against it. And you see down, just looking at this little actual for this year, we haven't really met many targets apart from one, which is poetry, which has rather exceeded the title by 1,500. And the reason for that, the story for that is, of course, that we've been shut for 4 months and we only reopened in July. And since July, up to July, we broadcast a poem every day, which rather distorts the figures. If you look at the funding actually against targets, poetry's done rather well there. So let's take poetry out of the equation and just look at what the targets are against actuals in our funding agreement up to today in the current year. And you see that we are on target on nearly every one of our art delivery targets there. We give you audiences. Don't know if you can recognize yourselves in that crowd there, but that's a typical night at the Arts Centre. And the audiences we give you is target is 46,000 ticket buyers per year, and to date we've delivered 45,392. What do these people come to? There's a breakdown of a year of what they come to. Quite a lot of gigs, folk music, comedy, so there's a slight bias, you'd probably say, towards young people. And where do they come from? So this is our entire mailing list. This is a sample of 40,082 people. And if you're thinking, is there a slight bias? It's almost exactly 50-50 from people outside of the borough of Colchester and people inside of the borough of Colchester. Looking at the people within Colchester, if you break down our mailing list into the 5 indices of social deprivation, with the poorest on the left and the richest on the right, you see that the most popular, or the group from which most of the people come, is the second poorest in the borough. So this really, I wanted to address full on the idea that the arts is just for the elite, the educated, the middle class. If you put that into a little pie chart, you'll see that 39% of the audiences come from the lowest 2 sections of the of Colchester, 39%, over a third. So in our funding agreement, what else did we say? we said that we would respond to the climate change emergency. We said we would conserve and enhance biodiversity, tackle the causes of inequality and support the most vulnerable people. We would provide opportunities for young people, and we would protect and enhance and celebrate Colchester's unique heritage. So, climate change. Here's our carbon footprint. You see the various headings there: gas, electric, waste, water, business travel, and one huge column at the end. And that's how audiences travel to us. We can do bits and pieces about the other ones, but how audience travel to us is a real challenge, but it can't be ignored. We can't just because we can do things about the other ones, and we do, can't ignore the other one. I want to come back on that. So here's a little list of the things that we do about the other ones. No fossil fuels. So kind of those are the things that you'll see on grey water used on lots of little, all sorts of. There's our lovely brand new loos with the flushing system, using the grey water. But coming back to that other big column there, what can we do about that? All the other things you can do, they're kind of like micro actions. You know, it's like turning off the tap when you're brushing your teeth while you've got the engine running. If you've got this huge engine running, you know that all these things won't really make a huge amount of difference. So the only real way to approach this carbon is to look at other answers, to look at carbon offset. Now, carbon offset's a huge topic in itself, and you can look at it in all sorts of different ways. So when we toured a choir from New York this year, we made an attempt to measure the carbon of the tour, 22.5 tons, and to offset that carbon by investing in local, environmentally based and social enterprises. And we chose two. We chose the e-cargo bikes run by Lee, and we chose the fantastic project We Grow Together that I know my colleagues work with as well, the Big Garden project up in Highwoods. There's a guy called Wayne Setford, who I last saw playing a rather nasty cleric in The Hunchback of Notre Dame on the stage of the Mercury a couple of weeks ago. And we made a calculation of £50 per tonne. If you look at the Woodland Trust, they calculated at £25 a tonne, so we just doubled that and invested those money. And this is something, a pilot that we want to carry on doing, that we want to talk to our colleagues about, and that we think we need to address with some urgency. We talked to Ben Plummer as well, who does some fantastic work for Colchester Borough Council. Conserve and enhance biodiversity. Look at that old man there. I promised I would not shave until the art centre reopened when we closed for lockdown, and that was several months in. Not as it finished up, but yes. So that's me talking to Nell Van Helleg, and she's the moth lady. We did a project called Meet the Neighbours, and our neighbours all live in the graveyard next to our art centre. They are the bugs, the plants, the lichen on the gravestones. We spoke to all the experts in these individual fields. The hedgehog lady we spoke to, the moth lady, the bird man, the fox person, the bug person. We recorded it all, but we also invited an artist, being the art centre, to imagine how species themselves might respond to climate change. There's all the moths we found one night. Just go back to that because I want to come back. That's 30 different moth species we discovered in one night. Here's an invented species. That's the luminous hedgehog. No chance of driving him over or her. This one is the cheese and onion crisp packet moth, disguised. This one is the blue dandelion, easier on the eye than the yellow one, will escape the hedge cutter or strimmer. And this is my favourite one. Whoops. The two-fingered stinkhorn mushroom, a very robust response to human intervention from the artist Lisa Wesley. Vulnerable people and inequality. This is a chap called Vijay Patel. He's from Jaywick. He is a brown, gay, neurodiverse artist. to really address how we speak to these communities. We can't patronize them. We want the lived experience right in the center of our operation. So we invented a project called Game Changer. We invited VJ to respond to it. And he now works with the senior management team across everything in the venue, everything. He gets involved in the whole lot, the board meetings, the staff interviews, the programming, and he brings the sensibility of exclusion right into the heart of our operation. It's so thrilling and interesting working with him. He challenges us every day. We love working with VJ. He's a really interesting guy. He's introduced all sorts of initiatives that are listed down at the side there. We haven't got time to go into each of them. I could do 20 minutes on every one of them. Vulnerable people. I couldn't do this presentation without mentioning Frozen Light, one of our associate companies. Frozen Light make work for profound PMLD people, profound multiple learning difficulty young adults. And there they are at the Arts Centre with one of their beautiful shows. They use our venue to rehearse, and they respond in the most creative and beautiful way to talk directly to these people in our community. Enhance and protect our unique heritage. These are some of the enhancements we've made recently to make the building more accessible for people with disabilities. This is our loo and shower for wheelchair users. And I offer it as an example of a way of thinking, in that a disabled loo has to, by its nature, be functional. It is a utilitarian facility. But because you need space and bars and pull courts, there's no reason why it can't be beautiful as well. So I hope we've got one of the most beautiful facilities for disabled people in Colchester. Young people, I just wanted to show it's not all rock and roll at Colchester Arts Centre. That's the Colne Valley Youth Orchestra, who we work with our wonderful chair, Nigel. Just a quick shout out for our volunteers that form a big part of it. It's all right, I'm nearly finished, I'm nearly done. What you get money, you get inward investment, you get jobs, you get people, you get art, you get social engagement, you get partnership over climate emergency, biodiversity, inequality, young people. You protect and enhance the Colchester's unique heritage, and you get data. And I'm just going to ask you to indulge me a little bit while I just wind up on data. So I've tried to give a very data-driven presentation. I've tried to fill it with facts and figures and real numbers. But data only tells part of the story. I'm on a governor of a local comprehensive, Philip Morant, and at those meetings we get shown figures for 2 hours. And I'm just screaming out at the end of it, is there anything that anyone can tell me, a story that can describe these children as anything other than just countable units? We produced between us, we produced a Colchester cultural strategy. And it wasn't easy. It's hard trying to describe, to put into numbers what the art is. And we were looking at it and wasn't quite right. And what was missing was the story. It didn't tell the whole story because numbers just really mean people. Wow, person's disappeared at the end of it, but it's all right because he's here. So the person I wanted to tell you about, is Jordan Schultz. Now, Jordan is non-verbal autistic. We went to see a film together called The Reason I Jump, written by a non-verbal person with autism. Coming home from that, he said to me, why does everyone in the world hate people with autism? That's what he said to me. And I wanted to say back to him, they don't. A lot of people do. There's a lot of hate there, Jordan, but not everybody, because all three of these venues engage with you, Jordan. This lovely photograph was at first sight. He's been at the Mercury. He's worked with us. It's a great pleasure to have people like Jordan in our community. He's not just data, he's Jordan. Here he is. Butcher. There he is. I've asked him to come along here tonight. And I just wanted to offer that as a real person in amongst all the facts and figures I've thrown at you. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Anthony. That's excellent. And thank you, Jordan, for being here as well. We didn't know about that extra addition. Thank you. So in terms of how we're going to take questions, I think we did agree, but we'd do all presentations and take questions at the end. Is that what we're ready for? So thank you, Anthony. We'll move on. Who is next, Sally or Steve?
Good evening, everybody. I'll take you through a summary of the Mercury's activities, touching in last financial year and then looking ahead to coming year. So Mercury is the Roman messenger god tasked with connecting gods and mortals, and throughout the pandemic, connection was one of our key watchwords. I don't need to say around this table, but the impact of COVID was significant on the organisation. Overnight, we lost £3.5 million worth of turnover, and all staff were sent to work from home. But most importantly, what we did do is set up a hardship fund for freelancers who had worked for us in the previous 2 years. And that was a confidential process. And then overnight, we transferred all of our live program online for the very first time. But I'm really, really pleased to say that we were able to retain all of our staff without any redundancies. We sustained our reserves to pre-pandemic levels. And of course, we kept project managing our capital project right the way throughout. And we didn't lose one day on site, and that's real credit to our contractors. In response to COVID, we were able to offer support across the borough. We seconded staff to CBC. We offered staff paid time off to volunteer at the food bank with Community 360. Our wardrobe staff made scrubs and masks for Colchester General. We were active members of the One Colchester Emergency Board, and we offered free space to local schools and the mosque and various other community groups to use for social distance learning or meetings. Throughout last year, we held 118 online events. This included 10 accessible performances, for which we were particularly commented we were one of the only pantos that went online that was both audio described and was subtitled. And our Cinderella that we'd recorded the year earlier, that was watched by over 450,000 people across the UK and internationally. Our creative engagement programme kept going. We had a digital theatre festival in partnership with the University of Essex. We had 214 engagement sessions, youth theatre sessions, and we also engaged with local care homes with various sing-alongs, both from the garden for residents or online. And then a variety of other classes and workshops that you can see just there. But most importantly, I think significant in our history has been our Mercury Rising project. And last June, we finally opened our brand new building. And I hope you've all had the opportunity to visit. This was only one of 5 capital projects to open last year in the UK. Of course, we were late, but only 9 months late. And compared to some other regional colleagues, I can tell you that's not late. Yes, the costs went up to 11.8 million, but we met all of those increased costs. And I'm really pleased to report we have a very good BREEAM rating that puts us in the top 25% of sustainable buildings in the UK. And for our first time in our history, we are fully accessible, both front of house and backstage. So that means that we can offer inclusive employment and participatory activities throughout the building. We had a wide variety of funding successes, and this is particularly in partnership with the borough, where we had emergency funding from the Arts Council and DCMS's fund to meet the increased costs on capital. The partnership around Town Deal, and we were able to complete all the external landscaping around us, and several other foundations that you'll see there. But again, and I think as Ant had just really touched upon, that investment only becomes on the basis of your investment and that of the Arts Council. Throughout the period, we've been involved in the various aspects of civic life, through our staff and through our board representation, Creative Colchester, and we are all in the process, as all the MPOs, of setting up a local cultural education partnership, and to re-energise that as a partnership for schools and for after-school activity. Our work in particular with the Colchester bid, be that whether it's Christmas light switch-ons or various other activities, the Chamber of Commerce, Haven Gateway, and of course Visit Essex. The first 6 months since opening, I'm really pleased to say that we've achieved a capacity of 65%, and we hit 94% for Panto. We didn't lose any performances. It was a bit of a tough job there, but we did it. And attendances are mixed, but we are open and people are gradually coming back. One particular success of the new building, and they do say build it and they'll come, and we've now launched 21 brand new weekly activities. They hit 95% capacity with over 16,500 local residents participating. And we've now launched a new schools programme with our new schools and education producer, working with 26 local schools with over 3,000 participants. As you know, we survey, for those of you who come along, we survey every time that somebody attends, and also we'll use accessible means of surveying, be that one-on-one, etc. And you can see our TripAdvisor and our Google ratings are near to 5 and 4.5 on TripAdvisor. The economic impact, it costs about 4.4 million each year to run the Mercury, and we employ 107 staff, the majority of whom are Colchester residents. 24% of our annual turnover comes from yourselves and the Arts Council. And it's always important to note that the Arts Council would not invest unless there was a partnership between yourselves and the Arts Council. And we generate 76% of our own income each year, and we're here on target to hit 3.1 million this year, obviously because it's only trading on a 9-month year and not a full year. I seem to have just hit, sorry. So every pound invested, we generate a further £3 in Colchester. And as an organisation, we spend 3.7 million locally, including our own purchasing. So you'll notice from our new food and drink offer that we prioritise locally sourced produce. So whether that's our fish from Mersey or local Colchester beer, etc., or even jumbo gin. And then we will also prioritise any other suppliers right the way across the organisation. And annually, our audiences spend 3.8 million a year, and that's an average of £29 per head. The economic impact in particular of our capital project, throughout the pandemic, we were able to work with these local contractors to almost keep them afloat. We created 52 new jobs, and of the 11.8 million, I'm really pleased to say, and really in partnership with Colchester Borough Homes and CBC's procurement staff, we were able to spend 10.6 million in the local economy. And you'll recognise some of those contractors there. And by opening the new building, we've created 44 new employment opportunities, including just last week, we were part of the Essex County Council initiative with 12 young people on the Kickstart programme, which is for young people who've been unemployed for 6 months. We've been able to offer them 7 jobs, which is fantastic. And we were able to bring 9.2 million of new investment into the borough. And one project in particular you may have heard of is our Mercury Creatives programme. It's where we offer support to local sole traders and businesses and gives you their indication. We have supported 114 businesses, and we've generated over £1 million worth of new investment for each of those businesses. And they can range from graphic designers, hat makers, directors, writers, but 65% of those participants are Colchester residents, or they trade in Colchester. So just to give you a flavour of the future, our productions will continue to be risk-taking and compelling across the whole commercial and visiting work. And our targets there gives you an idea that we'll connect with obviously national, international theatres as we receive touring in, and we produce 8 of our own shows each year. And so average, if we're back to pre-pandemic levels, is about 125 to 130,000 people a year. 45,000 people are now non-ticketed, and that's gone up significantly because, of course, we've now got the space. And we will engage with just over 36,000 people around creative engagement activity. As I mentioned, we'll have touring in and out, be that for one-nighters or week-longs. Of course, during the pandemic, it's particularly hard hit, but we are now starting to recover, and the industry, as you're aware, has been one of the hardest hit across leisure and hospitality. And our studio now is able to be programmed year-round with new work, and that's very much concentrating on local artists and local stories. And just to give you a flavour of our future programme that's emerging right now, but that will be developed further, we have a whole talent development programme for new artists, for writers, performers and producers. Our SEND programme, which is holiday and after school work with young disabled people and their families and carers, which is part of the Essex Short Break scheme. Our Cocktail Cabaret, which is our free monthly LGBT cabaret night. That's very importantly a free and a safe space for that community to gather. We've got a new programme starting, an after school programme in Grainsted. And we have a schools tour around the themes of consent, mental health and well-being. And those themes have very much arisen from our Teachers Forum around the challenges that young people are facing today. Then we work in partnership with Colchester Pride, organising, for example, their main stage, Black History Month, World AIDS Day, Refugee Action Holiday Clubs, and the Seniors Programme that takes place on Thursdays now. And we have not one, but 2 community choirs, which are new across the programme, again, because we have all of our new rehearsal space across the organisation. So I hope that gives you a flavour, and I'm happy to take questions and comments when we get to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Another good performance and lots to digest there. I've written lots down. So thank you. And we'll move on finally to Sally from First Sight. Sally, please.
Just wait for my slide. Oh my God, I look terrible. Don't show that. Okay, I've got a cold. That'll be my explanation for how I look at the moment. I'm Sally Shaw. I'm the director of First Sight. We are the glorious Golden Banana Art Gallery at the end of the High Street, for those of you who don't know us. Like Ant and Steve, I'm going to cover the last 12 months and thinking about the key headings in our funding agreement and our major successes over that period. 2 return on investment facts to start with. I don't have a pie chart. I'm feeling seriously underpied. I've got you a beautiful painting by Lucy Harwood. I'll talk to you about facts around that. 2 facts. I'm rather proud of these. First Sight in the last 12 months, using your £97,000 investment, has generated an additional £1.9 million of income. That's the highest we've ever achieved in the last 10 years. A large chunk of that is CRF money. We were very fortunate, along with Steve Nant, to get money from the Arts Council to support us through the COVID period. And I'll talk to you about some of the things that we've done to invest that money. A large proportion of that money went into our reserves. Anyone who's ever looked at First Sight's accounts online knows that our reserves are pretty thin. Our reserves are no longer the dire place that they were in. They are actually at the highest levels that we've ever had in the last 10 years. And that is a really serious improvement for us. It gives us some security. Please take that off. It's terrible. It gives us some considerable security. We're never completely secure, but it's a huge advancement from where we've been in the past. The other significant thing that's happened actually since the last scrutiny meeting, and I need to thank everybody here for helping me, especially Steve, actually. Essex County Council have reinstated First Sight's core funding as a result of the last scrutiny meeting. And a huge part of that is because Colchester have invested in us consistently for many years now. And your investment has enabled me to go to Essex and to make that change. And it's incredibly significant. Without that dual investment from the 2 local authorities, I would be in a very difficult position in terms of arguing the case for Arts Council funding. So your support is beyond critical. It's extraordinary what it enables all of us to do. It's more than just money, it's confidence and security, and helps us build our aspirations. The second number I wanted to share with you, that our activity over the last 12 months has generated, I find this difficult to believe myself, I'm assured it's correct, has generated £2.2 million worth of press coverage for Colchester, not just for First Sight. £1.2 million of that was for the Museum of the Year campaign and then winning. And Colchester is carried with First Sight in that press coverage. So that's an unplanned and an exceptional and exciting thing to be able to say in the midst of all the uncertainty that we've all experienced in the last 12 months. I intend to use that exposure and that coverage to build on not only First Sight success, but also on Colchester. There are a few things that have happened as a result of the Museum of the Year win that will bring benefit to Colchester Town Centre in the next couple of years. I can't share those at the moment, but there are considerable knock-on effects that I'll talk to you about in the coming months. Next slide, please. Slowly. Oh, really slowly. Next one. Oh, to have a mouse. Oh, there we go. So our artistic programme. We've managed to deliver the full programme without any change to what we were expecting to deliver in the last 12 months. It was a little bit of a delay at the beginning of the financial year because of the lockdown, but we opened ready to go with a full programme, and it's not been too significantly affected. Most of our exhibitions have been both world-class and local at the same time. So this is Michael Landy, he's an Essex man. We're also showing the Benton End Exhibition at the moment, which is all local artists from the last 60 to 70 years, looking at the cultural attitude maybe of the East Anglian region through a very specific art school. So we're very proud of the fact that we celebrate Essex and Colchester's extraordinary cultural weight. We have these incredible names like Michael Landy, and we have this extraordinary local heritage right on our doorstep, and we bring all of those artists through the doors at First Sight, and we tell the story of Essex and Colchester. Next slide, please. This is Simon Carter, a very fantastic local artist. We've actually been working with Simon on and off for about 4 or 5 years now, And we try to continue the relationship with our artists beyond just one exhibition. So Simon and I have been talking about how we expand his practice through social media, and he started making short films of how he makes work. He's been making films out in the landscape. He's bringing that work back into First Sight. We're creating exhibitions with him. We're now selling his work to local buyers as well. So there's a nice cyclical relationship starting to happen through the artists that we're showing. It's not just about presenting their work, it's about supporting an entire practice. And support at the moment includes the important aspect of selling work, making money, and supporting living circumstances in a very fundamental way, which Ant and Steve also talked about. Next slide, please. This is very quick. This is the Benton End Exhibition. One of the best elements of this show, which is a new thing that we've tried, it's a bit of an experiment. It sort of riffs on something that Anthony did way back. If you see on the right-hand side, in front of the two ladies who are looking at the two paintings, underneath, there's a little drawing that's on the wall. We sort of did this as a little bit of an experiment, but anyone coming into the exhibition can make their own work in the exhibition, a la art school ethics, and they can put it on the wall and they can show it alongside Lucian Freud. That has been a phenomenal success. We now have a stack of thousands and thousands and thousands of people's drawings. We're not quite sure what to do with them, but we'll do something. Oh dear. Lucian Freud knocked us out. So we are building this idea that we celebrate everybody's creativity at First Sight, and we celebrate it on the same platform. So you can show alongside Lucian Freud at First Sight, even if you've never made an artwork before in your life. And that's something that's incredibly important to me, that we celebrate creativity in everybody, but we also celebrate the effects of creativity and what it can do for people, not just in terms of mental health and well-being, but also in terms of resilience and agility and thinking about the job market and transferable skills. Next slide, please. Sorry. We also, some of the money that we got from the CRF grant from the Arts Council, we used to invest in our outdoor space. This is another bit of an experiment. I'm keen to think more creatively about what happens, not just inside First Sight, but outside. And because we love food at First Sight, I thought automatically we should get the world's biggest courgette and stick it on the ground outside. It's a courgette, Mike, come on. There are two. This is Florian, his name is Florian, and the other is Keith. These are by Sarah Lucas, who is one of the young British artists. She's a bit of a rebel in her time, good friends with Damien Hirst. And she lives just over the border in Suffolk. She's another local artist. She is massive. And so her courgettes. So we've started investing in the area around First Sight. And I'm very keen to think about how we expand this programme to potentially further across Colchester, and whether or not we can look at doing a sculpture trail that might take people from various different wonderful places in Colchester to our other cultural venues maybe, and connect the dots across the town centre, get people walking and looking for art. So sculpture outside has started. There are other sculptures too, it's not just the courgette. Next slide, please. Children and young people, we continue to do all sorts of fun things on this front. This is the exhibition Keep Being Amazing, which we opened recently, just this side of Christmas. This has been curated with families and children from the Holiday Fun programme, which we've now been running for about 4.5 years. So not only are people coming into First Sight to eat a meal and have fun and get stuck in, they are also curating exhibitions now. Can you put the next slide on as well, please? So that was work curated from the Arts Council's national collection and selected in collaboration with our curatorial team. For the opening weekend of Keep Being Amazing, we had over 1,000 visitors through, and that was primarily children and families all coming in. I met one parent at the end of the day who said, yeah, I sort of dragged them in at 10:30 this morning and it's 5:30 and we've only just left, and we've spent the entire day here. It's been completely for free. We've eaten a meal, we've had an incredible amount of fun, and we don't really want to go home. And that was one parent with 4 children, and she spent the entire day there. So We're expanding and deepening the relationship with families, and we're beginning to understand what more we can do to support people in need, particularly children and young people. Next slide, please. On the subject of holiday fun, we're now over 12,000 meals that we've provided through the programme. It's about 12,500 at the last count. 60% of that has been in the last 18 months, which just shows you what's happening on the doorstep. That equates to 40,000 participations, which is a weird expression. If we had a ticket for every thing that you could do in that program, each of the 3 sessions, the sport, the food and the art, if each bit was ticketed, that would have been 40,000 tickets that we've distributed. We calculate that we've engaged with more than 1,000 families now through the Holiday Fun programme. And these are families who don't normally go into art galleries. They certainly don't spend that long in them when they do go in. So the Holiday Fun programme rolls onwards. My hope is that we can expand the programme to other venues, and that we can spread the love and share this idea. How can we reach more families? How can we quadruple that number? How can we connect the whole of the town centre around the idea of supporting children and young people in this way? It's not going away. We need to do more. I can't do it on my own. I need friends. Next slide, please. So audiences, we are averaging at the moment at about 70% of pre-COVID levels. When you compare that with the major national museums in the centre of London, they're at about 40 to 45%. That's a significant achievement under the circumstances. A lot of those are new visitors who are new to Colchester. We're drawing in more people from outside now, as well as catering for large numbers of local visitors. The other number that I'm very proud of is the 18%. We now are registering 18% non-white audiences in First Sight. So that's a significant amount more than the local resident population. It's also up from 11% before COVID. So something's happened in the last 2 years. It might be to do with our digital activity. It might be to do with the Museum of the Year and the amount of coverage we've had for being closely connected with communities. It might be because of the collaborations that we've done with certain charities and organisations. It's hard to determine exactly what's created that, but it's happened. And it's not something that I could have predicted. I would have expected it to go the other way, but there is some really interesting news inside those numbers. Next slide, please. Speaking of communities, lots of people have been asking me, what are you going to do with the £100,000 of Museum of the Year money winnings, Sally? I now know what I'm going to do. I didn't know for a long time, but I had a text from Maria Wilby over Christmas. Maria Wilby, who I'm sure you know, runs Refugee Action Colchester. We're going to invest all of that money in an asylum seeker who is an artist living in a hotel on the A12 outside of Colchester. He's made this artwork. It's a terrible picture. It's from his mobile phone. It's a rug. It's 2.5 meters wide by 2 meters tall. And it shows, hand-woven by him into this rug, it shows his journey from Iraq to Sweden as an asylum seeker. We are going to commission him to make a new rug, which is his journey from Sweden to the UK. And we're going to show both of those rugs at First Sight, and we're going to take those rugs on a tour of the country. And we're going to get both of those rugs into a national collection. So that's what we're going to do with our Museum of the Year money. We're going to invest it into somebody who has no legal status, but is one of the most amazing artists I have ever come across in 25 years of working in the arts. Next slide, please. We're working on a new vision. We're applying for our Arts Council money along with Stephen Ant, and we're rethinking. I'm ploughing all of our lessons from the last 5 years, all of our best successes into a new vision with new goals. This is part of our ongoing governance work. So our new vision is to make art matter. It does sound a bit political. It sounds like all sorts of things, but it is memorable. And the team are very connected to this idea that art does matter. It can make a difference. It's important. It's fundamental. It's very human. And when you connect with art, it really does regenerate. So our mission is also to ensure art and creativity are valued for their integral role in shaping a happy and healthy society for everyone. Everything that we've done in the last 2 years shows me over and over again, the more creative we are together, the more we can find exceptional solutions to all sorts of really big problems. And art and culture play a fundamental role in opening that creative space up in everybody's minds, not just artists, everybody's. We all have the capacity to think differently, to think creatively, and make the future better. Art galleries, theatres, and art centres are needed to create that space. Next slide, please. These are our new goals. They're all cyclical. I'm fed up of goals that go in a straight line. I've decided they need to go in circles. We think in curves at first sight. So this also reflects the process that we've been following for the last 5 years. So we do a lot of listening. We listen to our audiences, we listen to our communities, we listen to our stakeholders. We take what people tell us and we turn those into ideas, and we show those ideas. That's goal number 2, creating visibility for the ideas that come from those discussions with our communities and with our stakeholders. From what we show, we then advocate for change. We create visibility. We need to do something with that visibility. We need to make change. It's not enough to just show stuff. You need to show how you can be different. And that's what we're trying to do at First Sight. Then we share the results of what we do, and we share our resources. We share our building, we share our money, we share our success, we share our friendships. That creates social capital. That's extraordinarily valuable to the organisation and to our community. And then we start the process again and we listen, and it goes round and round. That is sustained by sustainability in the middle. Sustainability is now written across everything that we do at First Sight. It will be reflected in each of our other 4 core goals. We need to think ethically about how we do what we do. Where does our money come from? How much do we really need? Are there other ways to achieve what we're trying to do? It's not just about efficiency, that is about creativity and thinking about how we make our ideas happen and with whom. So those are our new goals and how we're working. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, the cafe. This is my other bit of good news. Jobs, making money, commercial success. Can I have a mini drum roll? And can you do a drum roll? Thank you. The First Sight Cafe, for the first time in its 10-year history, has made a profit. Do you know what? It did that in the middle of a pandemic. It's ridiculous. I think we've made a nice place for people to feel really safe, really happy. It's really comfortable. It's got some lovely colours. And it's in this wonderful building when there's loads of good stuff to do. We've begun to crack it. It's small profit, but it's profit, and I'm very proud of it. It's very hard won. We all know the story of that cafe, but finally it's doing something, and it's doing something good. We've also created a number of new jobs through the cafe. Next slide, please. Sorry. This is the slide that I chose for working with the bid. So our Christmas programme for 2 years now has really been designed to kind of, I think about it as kind of keeping up our end of the high street. We've got Stephen Ant at the other end, and you've got the Golden Banana at the other end. And between us, we do this wonderful job of bringing real excitement and fun to the centre of Colchester, particularly around Christmas. Our ice skating rink, we've done it twice, we've improved it. It was too slippery this year, apparently. But it's created jobs, it's created fun and a little bit of hope. But what's happened inside First Sight is it's taken people all the way through the building. They've turned up in a bit of a panic to get to the ice skating. Then what they've done is they've spent money in the cafe, and then they've spent a load of time in the galleries, and then they've spent money in the shop. So this weird ice skating idea has created a nice little economic circle inside the gallery that is bringing brand new audiences to us, is bringing brand new audiences to the town centre. And it's creating a difference, and it's creating excitement inside the building. Next slide, please. I think that's my last slide, you'll be pleased to hear. We also say that we will promote Colchester, and we have really, really done that this year. the Museum of the Year, the Art Fund Museum of the Year prize, is the biggest museum prize in the world. And that has been won by Colchester. It's not been won by First Sight. Colchester built First Sight. It's been won by Colchester. So things are finally paying off. That huge investment that you made, that incredible leap of faith is beginning to happen. And it's really, really having an extraordinary effect, not just here in Essex, but that's having an effect right the way across the cultural sector, I would argue. The things that we're doing in Colchester, all of us, people are paying attention. This is an extraordinary town doing things very, very differently. And I hope you can feel that in everything that everyone's saying tonight, because it's very different here to most other towns in the UK. There's an attitude and a radicalness that should be celebrated and should be continually invested in and should be rewarded and encouraged. It's incredible. I don't know how else to say it. I've worked in a lot of other places, but you don't get it anywhere else other than Colchester. I'll stop.
Thank you. An excellent place to stop, really. Thank you, Sally. And it was remiss of me not to introduce you as Museum of the Year, First Sight. Congratulations for that. We have congratulated First Sight many times for that, but thank you for bringing in the rest of Colchester into that too. Well, thank you all for such energetic, detailed, but succinct presentations this evening. That really has been a real blitz through, but really interesting at the same time and concise as we had stipulated. So thank you. I just want to say thank you as well for all of your efforts during COVID. I got to see that firsthand with some of the work when I was leader of the council during that time. But honestly, the impacts you have had on people's lives will never be fully understood. But we know it's at a very high level and has been amazing for many individuals. So thank you again for that, how you've dealt with your staff, how you helped us as a borough council as well, and in partnership with many others. So I wanted to just put that on the record. I'm sure we've got many questions from councillors around the table. I'm more than happy to kick off. And we're here to scrutinise you, but again, with such brilliant success and performance during such difficult times, it's quite hard to pick on questions. But I've got a few that I'll ask and interchange between you all. First of all, Ant, I know you do this sort of pay what you can nights. Is that the wonderful Wednesdays?
Yeah, that's right. So this is a project to try and encourage people to take a risk, to come and see an artist or a band or an act that they've never seen before. And one of the barriers that we take away is the barrier of the ticket price. So we ask, it's not free, it's different, it's pay what you can afford. So if you have got some dough, it's kind of like an honesty box. You should put some money. And the way we describe it, if you can't think what you can afford, maybe put 1/100th of what you've earned this week into the kitty. So if you've earned £500, put £5 in the kitty. If you haven't earned anything, then don't put anything in the kitty. It's guilt-free as well as being free. And come in and enjoy the work. You know, thank you for coming on this journey with us. Let's see what we've got tonight, because quite often I don't know what we're going to see either.
Thank you for that, because I was going to ask about financial analysis of that, understanding that, how it works, because I wonder whether some of the other organisations, not to put them on the spot, it just how that works and whether it's worth looking at for
you
others.
get more box office. I mean, if you're trying to encourage people, some of the things we put on are by people they've never heard of, sometimes doing something that they've never heard of. Well, why would you do that instead of when you can be at home watching Netflix? You know, there's some really good things on Netflix. So you have to think of a way of trying. So we change the dynamic from transactional, you pay me £10, I'll come in, put a panto on, I'll put on a show, to personal. Thank you for coming. If you've got some money, please put it in the kit. Come in and actually what you end up in the box, because I've been trying to encourage people to take risks for years, Mark, you know, to try and come and see some of the weird stuff that no one in their right mind would really want to come and see, you know. Then if you can just find a different strategy, and then you end up with more people, you end up with more money in the kitty, and you build up a kind of, you know, it's a bit like being loyal to a radio program. I grew up listening to John Peel. and I never knew what John Peel was going to play, but I tuned into John Peel because I was ready to take a risk. He used to play reggae next to punk, next to happy hardcore, next to Tony Bennett, you know, it's a right old. And so in my fevered head, particularly when I've been drinking wine, I think of it as a kind of like live version of the John Peel show, where people can come in and be introduced to sort of like strange and beautiful things. I'm chasing that light bulb moment. We're all chasing that light bulb moment. That all of you will have experienced it at some stage. You will have heard a track, read a book, at the end of the book, a poem. You know, it might be Thomas Hardy, Bob Dylan, Andy Warhol. When you finished it, nothing is ever going to be the same again, ever. You know, there's a philosopher who says there's 4 things that can change your life: love, art, music, and loss. Now, I can't do much about loss. I can do a little bit, maybe, about love, but I sure as hell can do a lot, or we can, through art and music. And you better watch out because Colchester's going to be full of it. So.
Thank you, Ant. I just wanted to make Steve in particular sweat about the idea of that pay-as-you-go kind of concept. Some of the things you mentioned that you do that are free, I've made a lot of had a lot of good times going to the Mercury, but perhaps there's something in there that you could. I know it's quite a risk. You got a bit even bigger audience, but what do you think?
Well, I think there's a range of ticket prices and entry points. I think it's important to highlight that for any show, you can get a ticket for £15 to see a main house show. Similarly, if you're unemployed or on benefits, there's the half hour before a show standby, which are a few pounds depending on the show. And similarly, all the free events that we'll have in the bar and in our new front of house area, that particularly is getting people coming over the threshold, etc. And then, of course, there'll be a whole range of other bursaries that we will offer towards our youth theatre and after school programs, and particularly for those from more low income groups or vulnerable communities. So it really is a kind of range of opportunities. And we hope later this year to be launching a pay it forward scheme where you might want to buy a ticket for somebody else who might not be able to access. So somebody may be able to buy somebody a ticket for the panto, etc.
Thank you, Steve. That sounds like a good idea, that final point. I was going to ask as well, Steve, you talked about Kickstart. So apprenticeships, perhaps Sally and Anthony, what opportunities have you had? You've talked about working with young people, but actually training them up whilst you do it as well. Could I ask you both about your projects with apprenticeships, please?
Our head of audience and communications is actually going to be in the job centre on Thursday interviewing people for the Kickstart programme at First Sight. It's a new thing for us. We've had various other forms of it over the years, but it's something that I'd like to make more permanent. My ideal scenario, and we're not there yet, my ideal scenario is that in the future you might have someone coming in through the Holiday Fund programme and sticking with us for long enough, volunteering, getting involved, and then eventually getting a job, and maybe even running the Holiday Fund programme, and then maybe going off to do something else afterwards. That's the full cycle that I'd like to achieve, because when you work in a creative organisation, you pick up all sorts of skills, and it's not just about becoming a creative or working in the creative industries. All those skills are incredibly applicable wherever you go. Somebody going into the job market now, a young person leaving school, is not only likely to change jobs, but change careers every 2 years. That requires a huge amount of self-knowledge, self-awareness, creativity and agility to be able to change what you do and how you do it so frequently and build a world around you that enables you to prosper. That is all about using your imagination. We are factories for the imagination. So, you know, that is my long-term ambition. I've never achieved it yet, but I'm trying to. So,
Yeah, Steve's shown us the way with Kickstart. You know, it has to be, there's various schemes that are out there. It has to be the right fit for the organisation. And I think after the pandemic, like Sally, we're in a position now where we're going to pick up that particular scheme. But we also do quite a lot of work with the old school work experience. And quite often we have people, they like to shadow the technical staff. You know, they like to sit behind I don't know what they do behind these sound desks and buttons and switches and stuff like that, and lights and what have you, and that kind of stuff. And so we've had a you know, quite a long roll call of people through there. We've also have people on casuals, and our organisation is sort of like an entry point quite often for those sets of skills. As soon as they get good, they go and work somewhere else as well. But that's good. That's like a rolling ambition, and yeah, it's good to have a mixture of experience and drive in the venue. So yeah.
Thank you for those answers. Teaching in school, I wish we were factories for imagination, but that's been driven out. I've got a few more questions, but I've seen Mike. Is it particular to now, or to the answers just given, or? Okay, I'll come back to you in a second. A further question. The Mercury Creatives, Steve, I wondered if you could either share an example with us or share after this meeting with us an example of how that works, and again, whether that can be replicated across other organisations, whether art or with us as well.
Certainly, be very happy to. We've had the programme externally evaluated, and basically we had 114 entrants, and they each received tailored mentoring support for 26 hours. So I left earlier this evening. Steve, one of the organisers of the Colchester Fringe Festival, he's receiving mentoring around marketing and business development. And obviously that was produced earlier last year and will come back again, as a whole wide range of other local residents. So we're talking graphic designers through to writers, as I said, sound designers, technicians. And particularly it's about giving them the resilience across the sector, because don't forget the creative industries pre-pandemic was the fastest growing sector of the economy. And I think larger than agriculture, oil, and a whole swathe of things. So actually the net contribution of the sector is something that we need to make sure that we can harness in the borough, because of course what we don't want is a talent drain. We want to sustain that talent locally and look at how we support them, because it's not often about bricks and mortar. It can be about a wide range of access to skills and partnering with other people locally. So we have a great relationship, obviously, with all the other MPOs, but with Colby. And on the subject of apprenticeships, we have a renewed MOU with the Institute and with Essex University.
Excellent, thank you. My last question, Sally, is to you. Our investments now, we always look at the social impact, but the environmental impact in everything we do. When we invested in that wonderful building, it is wonderful, it's architecturally wonderful, but it's not great when it comes to energy usage. I know from speaking to you in the past, and now those energy bills are rocketing. So I just wondered, it's not just about finance, it's about principle of environmentalism. I just wondered how, with sustainability being at the core of your goals in terms of environmental sustainability, how are you going to be able to improve that at first sight, knowing the issues with that building that you have?
That's a jolly good question. We're doing three things, and they kind of link to that cycle. The first step is we've applied to the Arts Council for capital funding. We haven't heard yet, to replace every single light bulb in First Sight. I think of it like the candles on the birthday cake for our 10th birthday. If you look, don't look. If you look, when you're next in First Sight, most of the lights aren't on. That's because most of the lights, you can't buy the light bulbs for them anymore. So the infrastructure that was put in there when the building first opened was already about 8 years out of date. So we were already faced with a big problem. Those light bulbs are hot, they're unsafe, they use extraordinary amounts of power. So we're changing, well, the hope is if we get the money, we'll change everything to LED. We will also not need a cherry picker every time we need to change the direction of a light bulb. All of these things add up. That adds up to resources left, right, and centre that we don't need to expend. The next thing that we're going to do is review the whole building and the surrounding area to understand how we can further reduce our output, but also create our own energy. I'd like to have conversations about whether or not there's an opportunity to club together so that the cultural sector could approach an environmental energy provider, and they would provide all of our energy for a reduced cost, but it would come from a better source. That is an incredible story for Colchester. If the entire cultural sector gets together and says, we're powered by the sun, that's an amazing thing to say. My utility bill is ridiculous. It needs to come down. But I'd like to do that in partnership. I'd like to share that opportunity. There's no point in me doing it on my own. We could have a fantastic conversation about how we could do that together. The third thing is, once we understand how far we can go with the principle of creating our own energy, I wonder whether we can actually share that resource, sharing it again, not just sharing the building, but sharing potentially the power that we could create. Every day I go into First Sight, I look at the roof and I think solar panels, and I think we can probably power ourselves and a few more people. Technology's moved on a lot. So what I'd like to do is not just only make First Sight sustainable, but make everything more sustainable if I can. Because there's a big political message inside that. People think it's expensive to make these conversions, but actually it's much more economical, and you can take everybody much further forward when you do it. So we've got to get together on it, I think. There's a big opportunity for us all to make a big difference.
Excellent. Okay, I look forward to that and working together. Thank you. I had Mike next, so Councillor Lilly, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. That's a good idea about the solar panels. It's big enough to do that, actually. There's a scrutiny panel, so we're supposed to scrutinise everything you do. And I usually read through all the documents, trying to find something to bring up against you, of course, especially Anthony as well. But there isn't anything, to be honest. I had to get a lot of praise, and you deserve that praise, I think, for everything that you do in Colchester. And it makes me so mad that when you read the negative comments, if you dare to go onto the Gazette website or anything like that, and yeah, Colchester is dead. Nothing happens in Colchester. Oh, it's finished. It's boring. Blah blah blah. And yet you look at what you three have put on over the years, and the acts and the theatre, the pictures, everything is there for everybody. Really, it is a diverse selection for everybody. I can't think there's stuff in there I don't like. There's stuff in there I absolutely do love. And in fact, I look forward to seeing Gong in 2 weeks' time. I remember buying their album Canberra Electro back in the early 70s, which was full of psychedelia nonsense, of course. And I hope they'll play the whole album on that night, but they've gone more jazzy for me, and I don't like jazz, but I want to see that and be surprised in there. Of course, I'm a nerd now. I'd want David Allen and Steve Hillis to be in there as well, but unfortunately, David Allen's passed away. What a great band to have on, and it's absolutely awesome. And you've got Jar Wobble, of course, as well, and I was lucky to see them with Sinead O'Connor back in the days of when I went to Glastonbury. They played in an off tent, which was very good. But that's what it's all about. You go, you take your chance. Oh, what's on? Let's go and have a look. and you are an important part of Colchester. And I went to Galway, and Galway is one of my favourite places to go. I went to the Arts Festival there for what a brilliant place, and I wish Colchester was exactly like that. And one day I hope it will be. It's heading there. You've got pedestrianisation. You've got all sorts of acts that go on. You've got the street culture. So I know Darius is here tonight, and I know he agrees with me on what he sees and what we want. Get away from traffic and pollution, and let's have people out enjoying themselves, and they can do. And they will do, and it's a great time to visit Colchester. You've got the history, and then you've got at night time you can go to something at the Mercury or visit the First Sight and go to the Arts Centre. So honestly, and there's so much more. You forgot to mention about the festivals that you have at First Sight, the Rice and Spice and the Gay Pride. Everything is on there during the years in the fields. And who else has that? Oh, let's go to Chelmsford, shall we? Whatever they have in Chelmsford, nothing compared to Colchester, I'm afraid. We've got it all, and yeah, I can't help but praise the three of you. But it worries me that if the three of you suddenly go or retire, have we got a legacy here that will carry on the wonderful work that you three are doing, or will it be entirely different, or is that what art and music is all about? Change.
Thank you, Mike.
Shall I respond, Councillor Lee? Just to say that we have a very clear succession strategy. It's not just me. There's another 106 people. It's a team effort right away across the board. And we have, as Councillor Barton will say, we have a very clear succession strategy. So it's not all resting on me. That's the wrong attitude and approach.
It's good to hear. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much. I'll end it there. And you're a fantastic part of Colchester, and you all make Colchester great, I'm afraid. It has to be said, and it's good to be part of that. So well done, everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Did Sally or Ant want to just comment on the legacy aspect at all?
Well, about 5 years ago, I did a little cameo at First Sight, and I was convinced that the Arts Centre would be on its knees by the time I came back. And my colleague who's behind me never tires of reminding me that I actually did slightly better when I was away. So a bit nervous to leave, really. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Thank you, Ant. And Sally?
Yeah, in the art world in particular, you see a lot of directors come and go, and you get these kind of career directors, and they sort of hop from one place to the next, and they kind of take their ideas with them. And when they go, the gallery either has a bit of a slump, or somebody else comes along and it looks and feels completely different. I've never believed in that as a way to run any organisation. I trained originally as an artist, and I particularly worked in public art, which is where you look at your surroundings for the inspiration for what you do, and you sort of read your environment. And that's what I've done at First Sight, is to take things from the place. These aren't my ideas that I've implemented at First Sight. These are Colchester's ideas. I've just opened the space for those ideas to happen, and I've facilitated them. And that's led to our success. These are genuinely not my ideas. I'm not being humble about that. I haven't had any ideas at First Sight. I've just listened to a lot of brilliant ones from other people. So for me, that's an organisation that I hope will live in the same way when I move on to whatever I move on to, whenever that happens. I don't want to. I bought a house here. First Sight has also given me every possible opportunity that I would ever want in a professional role. I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but also Colchester's given me that as well. You know, I'm a single parent. I didn't know that I could buy a house until I moved to Colchester. These are really important things. They keep people here. They retain all sorts of people here. The fact that you can do that in the art world is a pretty extraordinary thing. So it's about all of it collectively together. It's hard to separate these things up. Culture is formed from a town like Colchester. It's why we're all here, really. I feel like I'm repeating myself now. I'm gonna stop.
Well, I'll ask you to end there. Thank you, and it's great that we've retained you all and keep you all, and we'll lock you in like a siege that we had a few hundred years ago. I have Lynn, and then Nigel, then Lorcan. Lynn, please, Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mark. I think from the three presentations we've heard tonight, it's absolutely crystal clear that our investment in these organisations is amply rewarded. And not only that, it's sort of repaid many times over, as we've heard today, with the employment, all sorts of things. And I mean, it's commendable. And I'm sure we all agree that it's a good use of our money. Not only do you produce these vibrant creative programmes, all of you, but you offer so much more, and we've heard a lot of that tonight, how you've reached out to different organisations, especially during COVID, and you've offered people hope, and you've offered so much to the people of Colchester, and I actually want to thank you for that. Like Mike, I'm trying to find things that you haven't done, but I wanted to ask about partnerships, but Steve's covered, you know, all the different partnerships that you've reached out to during the pandemic and before. I just wonder if there's any others that you've got in mind, any hard to reach groups that you feel you haven't made enough progress with yet, and that we can perhaps reach out and offer them something. I know you've covered lots, but at this point in time, although I hear what Steve says, it is very much a team effort that makes these things work. I do think we need to record that we're incredibly lucky to have you three talented people at the helm during this time, and I would like that on record because I'm very impressed with it. One more thing I wanted to say, I also like the way that you embrace what this council's aspirations are as well. You know, you're part of us, you're not individual organisations at all, you're part of what we're all about. I mean, when the council declared a climate emergency, listening to you tonight, how you've embraced that, particularly Anthony's list there, of things he's done as a result of that to support us. Just wonder if there's anything else you've still got on your list to achieve. I mean, Sally's outlined some of the things for First Sight, and I know with our new building at the Mercury, we've incorporated a lot of those things. So that's another thing that's to be commended, that I feel we do all work as a team, as one big team actually in Colchester, and that the residents definitely benefit from that. I think that's it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So 2 challenges there. Are there other groups we're not reaching out to enough yet? Was Lynn's first question, and then the greening. I saw Sally indicate first, then Anthony.
Yeah, the more we do to look at the barriers to why people don't come in to a place like First Sight, the more I understand how complicated some people's lives are and how difficult it is to get beyond that and to really understand what's happening. There's a few things around digital have been particularly pronounced. As soon as we reopened last summer, we hosted a community leaders meeting, and that was all of the main community organisations coming together. It was about 30 people, and one of the biggest themes there was about digital poverty. Even though we'd done all these wonderful things, and I felt like at First Sight we'd really shared a lot of stuff and we'd broken new ground, tons of people who just don't have a laptop or a mobile phone, or if they do, they can't access the stuff that's on it, or they're overwhelmed by information from the NHS or whatever. And it just made me realise I've only really scratched the surface of what we should be providing for people, and how much more there is to learn kind of inside people's lives, and then come back with that and change what we do. And similar with holiday fun, you know, I know that there are people who, even though we offer a free meal, can't afford to get to the free meal, or are too stressed and overwhelmed at home to leave the house. Part of the activity pack idea was getting into people's houses, making it somehow as easy as possible to just get stuff into people's houses, like invade in the nicest possible way. But we haven't. And I think I still feel like I'm reading this as a person who's sitting in a certain position of privilege. And it's very hard for me to not read it that way. I can only do that by inviting people from outside of my realm of experience into First Sight to change that with me. There's so much to do on that front. So much to do. Huge amounts of work. So we've done great stuff, but it never feels like enough.
Thank you. And then I'm sure Steve will want to say something as well.
So here's a group of people that I've been thinking about that we need to address, and they're completely invisible. You can't see them now, and because they haven't been born yet. I think I'm interested in something called cathedral thinking, so that when people built cathedrals, when they started laying the foundation stones, they had no idea what the actual finished article, because they were building it for 2 generations down the line. This hall that we're in now, this beautiful hall, this fantastic space that we're lucky to be in now, that wonderful organ that's been restored and is now played regularly through Nigel's work, that's a gift. That is a gift from a previous generation to our generation, and I like to think is what is our gift from our generation, not just in buildings, but in ideas and spirit. What can we give them? What can we be doing now between ourselves to build on that? And so, I don't have a blueprint, an idea. I love listening to you guys. I always get inspired listening to you folks, because it is an ideas-driven community in which we work, and I'm interested, and it connects very much with what I was talking about with climate change. It connects with biodiversity, trees that are being planted now, plants that are disappearing, species that are disappearing, the lichen I look at the lichen on the gravestones, and I wonder about the people who are below there, what they're thinking of it, what that lichen's thinking of it. If I could talk to that lichen, what would it be saying back to me? You opened this up, Lynn. You asked about ideas. You're asking the wrong people. We go on for ages. So, yeah.
Councillor Corey, I'm going to jump in on the lichen comment. Just to say, there was always the partnerships that emerged throughout lockdown and the various kind of phases over the last couple of years have been extraordinary. And I think we've all been challenged, whether it be on a very practical basis or on a more long-term opportunities, be it supporting young people with their mental health in schools, etc. There are some very, very basic things that I think there are challenges that exist. And for example, Park and Ride, we would love all to access. It finishes at 7 o'clock. So none of our audiences can access that. It doesn't run on a Sunday. The cost of buses for some of our low-income staff to come from Grinstead to work, if you're 21, and then you can't get a bus home if you're finishing a late night shift and feel safe if you're a young woman. So we are, as the employer, looking at how we support those individuals. So there's those types of things that actually, it's not about one community, it's enabling a wide range of communities to access. Actually, the opportunities of the public realm, feeling safe in the town centre, it's getting a lot better. And just by us together investing the town deal, funding outside of the Mercury, look at what's happened. People feel safer. Old people are able to come across from Balcombe Gardens, just simply have a cup of tea, meet other people, have some fish and chips, whatever it might be. So it's actually us together creating those places where people can gather and let that happen and let that community emerge and those partnerships.
Thank you all for those answers. Moving on to Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I came armed with quite a lot of questions this evening, but I think, as everybody's already said, they've been answered admirably many times over, I think, from all three of you. It's very exciting to hear what's going on. As befits somebody of my old age nowadays, I do tend to look back at the past. And one of the things it's interesting, actually, because I think Sally said something about the sort of courage it took for cultures to create First Sight. And I can also cast my mind back when I was on the board at, or whatever it was called in those days, at the Arts Centre. And I was on First Sight before it was as is now. And there's a tremendous amount of difficulties really in creating both those projects in those early days. And there's one or two people that had just the imagination, I suppose, to take those forward. And I look back and I can tell you who they were. It's tremendous that did happen. And I can see now what we've got. You know, it's tremendous to look back 40 years or something and see what has happened in that time to all those two particular establishments in particular. But obviously I've had relationships with the Mercury as well over the years in various ways. So I can see how that's developed as well. But I just think it's absolutely incredible to see what has been done and what has been achieved in that particular time. I don't come round to see what goes on in your what you're doing really as often as I should do. As Anthony said, I have sort of managed to raise some money to restore that, and now we're running recitals. So I seem to spend at least 2 evenings a week doing things for that, which is well worthwhile actually, but very time consuming, all these sorts of things. But I do have a couple of questions for you, one you probably slightly answered, but I just wanted to know what you thought you would take into the future as a result of COVID and restrictions. Maybe in more in how it would alter perhaps the artistic way that you all three operate. And perhaps there's challenges around how you react with the audience, whether there'll be a virtual audience more in the future or not. That would be an interesting question for me. And the other question I had for you was really around your individual cooperative activities. I mean, I don't think you have a sort of a shared website or anything like that. I just wonder how much of that sort of backroom sort of activities you maybe could share to perhaps save something in costs and that sort of thing. So those are my two main questions anyway. So thank you for the tremendous presentation. Thank you so much for all you've done over the years, and particularly the last couple of years.
Shall I go? I'll kick off and then, sure, all right. I think what COVID did was to remind us how precious staff as a resource are, and having to take everybody to work at home, and that skills base, and to do all that we could to retain that. Many of my regional colleagues did not, and they've lost hundreds and hundreds of staff, and how precarious the freelance, our industry runs on freelancers, particularly in theatre. So it was to protect those, and those freelancers are residents as well as paid and, if you like, PAYE staff. And what it did do was make us focus locally on work with local companies, local artists, and those that are across the spectrum of the creative industries locally. So it really did make us then having that to inform the work in the studio, the work on stage, and through our schools and engagement work. So that's really what I think COVID we're taking forward. We're all a little exhausted, if I were brutally honest, but we will get through.
I won't repeat what Steve said, but I agree, especially on the exhaustion front. It's made me think about placing different values on things, revaluing what we do and revaluing what's really important to us. It was interesting to see in the first lockdown the thirst for culture. We've been told for a long time it's this frivolous, unnecessary thing, and then a lot of people really wanted it all of a sudden. But culture to me doesn't just mean theatre or performance. It's human culture. It's the thing that binds us all together. It's how we express ourselves in the most fundamental sense. It's a form of communication. So it made me think about really basic things about what is culture, what is it for, why do we do it, why have we done it for millions of years, and what does that look like going forward? It's not a new idea, culture, but it made me think quite sort of slow thoughts, and it also made me think about time a lot. At First Sight in particular, we've been packing the programme for 4 or 5 years, driving people into the building to create a sense of liveliness, to create enthusiasm around the organisation again, to rebuild it, to re-energise it. I think we can do we can have more impact by doing less. We can do fewer shows and spread them out for longer, but do more with those exhibitions in terms of participation and engagement, and deepen our relationships with people, and really learn more about why people want culture in their lives and what we can do with it. So that's also a sustainability issue for me as well. We can do much more with much less. We can be much more effective, much more creative with our resources, including our creative resources. So it's made me think a lot of thoughts like that. It's made me think about equity a lot. I was thinking about that a lot beforehand anyway, but the subject of equity has been so exaggerated, so under the microscope because of COVID. It's also made me think about like crazy things around thinking about Black Lives Matter, thinking about the Industrial Revolution and the relationship to the environment challenge, and where all of these huge subjects collide. And it really is about environment, really. So it has been an opportunity to really reflect on the bigger picture subjects, but then also to zoom in on the very local examples of where that's playing out on our doorstep and what we can do about that in our own hands. There's a wonderful quote from Arthur Ashe, which I've repeated a million times now, but he says, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And it's the most compelling and active thing I've ever heard from anyone. And it makes me think efficient thoughts, it makes me think creative thoughts, but it makes me think I can do stuff now. And that's probably the most important thing that we should hold on to because of COVID. We did so much, so quickly, so immediately, but so collaboratively. We hopped over so many unnecessary rules that all of a sudden we realized weren't that important, and were probably more about power than they were about doing things. So all of that, we can probably put a lot of it down and concentrate on the most important things and move faster.
Just briefly, I think after the initial terror of 17th of March 2020, when they told us we would be shut and that was it, all of a sudden overnight with the folk club on one night, and the next night you were thinking, we're just going to get 2 planks of wood, nail them across the entrance, and that'll be it. We'll pack up and go home. But as the terror subsided, I have to say I quite enjoyed the space and the chance to think differently. It just gave you a different canvas, if you think creatively, on which to work. I saw a deer. I live on the Riverside estate down at the bottom of East Hill, just next to the Castle Park, and deer suddenly were on our estate. I could hear the birds singing in the morning. It was a completely different kind of like world that seemed to be woken up to. And suddenly, having got off the hamster wheel, we'd put on 7 gigs a week and we'd try and talk about nice ideas, but it's a pretty brutal kind of rock and roll venue that we run. It's like gig, and all of a sudden, when it stopped, it allowed us a space to look at the bill. I announced I'll be doing a poem every day until till we reopen, thinking it would be about 3 weeks. 523 poems later, we reopened, but then we had a different canvas. I had all these poems going on, and what I was talking about being in this beautiful space, I was looking at our building, thinking about the gift of the previous generation to our generation. All of a sudden, you're in it without a mosh pit in the front row and people kind of like journeying around, without it being full of the traffic of people, and just the space to be able to explore that. And with the poems, it was a way of connecting with people in a way that we simply hadn't done, who would never come to the Arts Centre for any number of reasons. But they, we did a sort of dial-a poem going back in the day, used to have dial-a disc. I don't know, people of a certain generation, it was 1/6. You're too young, but you used to so we did this dial-a poem. And people would, I'd read poems to people, and they were interested in the poem, but the poem was really just a conversation starter. You know, to say, I remember that poem when I was at school. That's what I asked that one for. And they didn't phone, people didn't phone saying, I want a poem. They said, Lynn wants a poem, you know, or Nigel wants a poem. Dennis, favourite poem, Dennis from school. Ring up Dennis and give him that poem, whether he wants it or not. And so they were just ways to begin conversations and connections, which in a way we hadn't done before. So after the terror subsided, I say it too loud, I rather enjoyed it. A different way, different process of working. And we, fortunate enough, like Stephen Sally said, we got furlough came in, we were able to retain our staff, thank goodness, we were able to kind of like just relax, you know, just the anxiety of being shut disappeared, to examine some different things. So, yeah.
Thank you all. I have Councillor Whitehead next, and then Councillor Willett. So Lorcan, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentations, echo the positive comments that others have made. And yeah, entertaining and visually interesting presentations like we don't often get in the scrutiny panel. I think you've all done a really good job of explaining the value that your organisations add to Colchester in all sorts of ways. And I think it came through really, really clearly in the presentations. And I have a question about the money side of that. And some of the presentations you highlighted how much of the money you spend is spent locally. So that's money that's going back into Colchester, jobs that are being created in Colchester. And of course, it's not just about where the money is spent, but the quality of jobs that are created as well, and how that benefits the community, builds prosperity in the community. And I think there's increasing recognition that that's important in a sort of broad sense. There's movements towards called various things, community wealth building, that kind of stuff, about extending that to supply chains and things as well. So my question is, do you pay the real living wage, in line with the Living Wage Foundation calculations? And do you insist on that from your suppliers as well? And if not, is that something that you would consider doing? And are there potential barriers to that you would need help to overcome?
Thanks for the question. It's a very good one. We've had a very close working relationship with the Fair Trade Foundation over a long period of time, and had ongoing discussions. We can simply say we're working towards the enhanced living wage. At the moment, it's not affordable across the organisation, but what we do is not differentiate in terms of age, in terms of what we pay, and we pay mainly above the national minimum wage. So as I'm sure many members will be aware, you can be at work and you can be paid £3.10 an hour, and you can be working with a colleague who's also receiving a national minimum wage, doing exactly the same job, and be receiving £8.91. So we do not differentiate on that, and we do not differentiate in terms of any promotion or access to professional development or staff training. But it's something we want to work towards. We're very heavily unionised across our sector, so nobody is on any dodgy contracts, dare I say. But it's one of those things across the sector that's becoming more and more a challenge. We are ahead of the curve. We just need to make sure we do. And of course, when national minimum wage comes in and any increases, as we're just about to see, the differentials will change within an organisation, and we need to reflect that.
We're increasing that next year within our budget that we've just approved. The difficulty that creates for us is other contracted members of staff within the team. The gap between those members of staff then decreases, so we then get these kind of internal imbalances that you have to be really sensitive to. So we have to then recalculate that. That's like the middle slice of people through the organisation. Your point about suppliers is a really good one. It's really hard. We can influence. Ultimately, we need their services. We can look elsewhere, and we do. We actually have more trouble with suppliers around other ethical issues rather than pay specifically. We have. I won't go into the detail of it, but we've had we get suppliers who don't comply with our code of ethics in the building, and that's really frustrating. So on the one hand, you can be running a program full of incredibly diverse people with very complex needs, and then you might have a supplier in the building who's effing and blinding and cursing. It's like it's a real clash. But we have said no to those suppliers, and we've sent them out of the building on occasion, and we look elsewhere. We stop the painting of that wall halfway if we need to. We have done that. It's a bit awkward, but we do it. But it's a really, I'd say that's a bigger problem for us, because we can, there's the circles of influence. You can control what's inside your organization a lot. It takes a bit of time, but you can, and it's our responsibility to. But beyond that, it becomes very difficult. That may be something that the council could help us with. It might be a collective code of ethics or a collective statement that we would want to reach and meet.
Yeah, on the wages, we have to freeze one of the conditions of the funding that we've received, the Cultural Recovery, CRF, is that we have to freeze wages, including my own law, and it's outrageous. That has to be. So, but when it's reintroduced, I think it's a great point, and I think we would definitely try and do that. We don't take on any apprenticeship schemes, because quite often apprenticeship schemes say, oh, you can pay people, £3 an hour, £4.50 an hour, and we wouldn't do that. That's sometimes why we don't maybe, step up as quickly as there are other options, etc. But the main problem, the one that Sally's identified, that's really, and when I was talking about VJ, he's introduced the idea of an access rider and a code. We call it a code of kindness rather than a code of conduct, because it's just sometimes about being polite to people, not just saying something that's inappropriate because you just weren't thinking, or it's kind of like stuff. And sometimes, particularly with the touring bands, the sound engineers, it's a very male orientated industry. We have a woman who is our production manager and technician, and she is regularly subjected to just casual remarks, etc., which are inappropriate, annoying, frustrating, silly, rude, all that kind of rubbish, really. And it's a real kind of like struggle. But with we kind of talk about it, we share it, we're aware of it. We talk to VJ about improving ourselves, particularly around attitudes, disability, all these things. It's about we like the title Code of Kindness. It's just an attempt to treat people properly, but it's a challenge, particularly people coming in. Our own staff, we're all lovely, but the people coming in can be tricky.
Thank you. I appreciate the positive answer, and I think it would be good for our council to think about how we can support you in those areas as well. And I have one more question, which is about it's about change and partnerships, and it's we have had a change of administration in the council, and we may yet have another one in a couple of months. But we're a year or so into that now, and so and I don't think we're just here to scrutinise you, and we're here to scrutinise our administration as well. So I just wonder how that relationship has been over the past year, and are there ways in which it you might hope that it could be changed or improved going forward into the next year?
That's me then going first, isn't it? Good question. I think what we do is very, very clearly articulate we are non-political as an organisation. We have to be as a registered charity. And we will always look towards what the organisational and shared objectives are. And so, if you like, we've all been through an international pandemic with the change of administration. We built a new venue in the change of administration. So actually, we've always gone back to first principles, to why are we there, what do we do? And we try not to be persuaded by changes of administration. The same as we would not want anybody to be responding to me as an individual. I am there as the temporary person in the seat along with my colleagues running the Mercury. There will be change always. So it's about getting that sense of partnership right, clear objectives, and that we go forward. And I will, on behalf of the organisation, seek to be quietly challenging, a critical friend, dare I say, because actually what we're doing is benefiting from the strength of that partnership at present. And I look around, we're a part of many, many networks across the country, and everybody looks towards the partnership with yourselves and your shared MPOs as they look aghast at what the relationship is. So if we were to sacrifice that for party politics, I'd be slightly disappointed, but there will always be healthy debate.
I think what we would all, I'm not going to speak on behalf of my colleagues, I think it would be great to have a sense of longer term thinking from whoever. I don't mind where that comes from particularly. And I think Steve's point around how we gather around collective points of common interest that we're trying to achieve together might be the way to do that, so that whoever the party is, perhaps we're all walking towards the same longer term aims. Ant's point about gifts to the future generations makes you think much further down the line, which makes you have much bigger thoughts, which kind of dilutes that political discussion helpfully. It's an inevitability, and it does affect us, but we need to think of ways to achieve, we need to think beyond that. It's not helpful. It's not particularly healthy. It does feel like this political cycle is so short. It's 6 months at best, when you take out the 3 months either side of going in and going out of an administration. It's very difficult to create sustainability for anybody, not just our organisations, but the people that we serve. It's very difficult to create other partnerships around that. You know, my Essex funding is connected to a 4-year cycle that ends 1 year before my Arts Council funding will do. Hopefully, fingers crossed that I get it. So that creates difficulties, unnecessary. We have to administer those problems. That takes time and energy. So I don't know how you do that. It's not a question that I can answer, but I would love to see a sense of longer term collaboration somehow. I don't know really if that's a political possibility. I'm not sure.
I echo the cathedral thinking, that somehow, I mean, you're governed, you're on a 4-year, I don't even know it, so I can't keep up with it. Every year you have another lot of elections, don't you? I mean, how that works. But one of the brilliant things about democracy is that the voice and the democratic process. But one of the difficulties is short-termism. The longest decision we probably all make in this room in our lives is what you've just done, buy a house, because you think you make a 25-year commitment. But what do we do over and above that? There's 2 little plaques that got taken down and re-put up when we were doing the works at the Arts Centre, and they were saying something about number of shillings that we will donate to the Borough of Colchester in perpetuity, which is quite nice, quite a nice phrase, really. And I think I've worked in this borough 31 years, so I've the changing of the guard at the in the administration, so I've seen them come and I've seen them go, but they've never once has anyone interfered, said, you know, you can't put Eddie Izzard on when he was unknown. We put him on, no one knew who he was, or Jeff Norcott, you know, from the other side, that now that we put on, no one's ever, and I think that's a kind of like a healthy distance. Whichever way you look at it, Colchester has got it spectacularly right in terms of its long-term investment. Whether that's a combination of whether you wanted to do it when Nigel was thinking about the Arts Centre 40 years ago, or whether it's kind of like a bit of luck, or it's a bit of kind of like a leap of faith, building first sight. But whichever way, this town delivers, punches so far above its weight artistically. It's really a joy to be part of that, about that community and that town. It's really good. But in perpetuity, is what I would say.
And if I can just add quickly, I can also tell the difference between a work meeting and a party. So there is moments within where we all do have to look at ourselves and our behaviours.
Thank you very much for the answer.
Thank you all for those answers. And our final act this evening, I think, is Councillor Winnetts. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As a Philistine, I always feel overawed on these occasions, and I don't really know where to go. But what we're doing this evening is we are scrutinising the payment of public funds to the arts organisations. And if public funds are used, as a Philistine, I have an expectation that the benefit will be perceived by all people in the borough. Now, listening to the presentations this evening, one of the essential themes was that no one should be excluded from enjoying the arts, and significant explanations were made on how the disadvantaged and the diverse were incorporated in the programmes of the three arts organisations. However, having listened to that, I was a little perplexed and thought, well, what is being done to ensure that the ordinary person who is not a member of a diverse group or a disadvantaged group is actually benefiting from the public funds being put into these organisations? And I know you can, Chairman, you can argue it either way. You know, the vast majority of ordinary people might just be a large set of hard-to-reach people. So perhaps they just looked at from a different dimension. But I just did get this feeling that so much effort is going into providing for the disadvantaged and the diverse that perhaps the majority of people, the ordinary people like me, are not really benefiting from this public funding. I had a really bad moment at one point, Chairman, when we learned that contractors who are ordinary people like me, who go down to the pub and perhaps speak in a rather coarse way, were actually excluded from one of the venues because their cultural values were seen to be significantly less than the cultural values being proposed by that organisation. That seemed like cultural fascism to me, Chairman, and I think